In today's video, we'll be talking about a Persian gangster that went off the radar 15 years ago and remains one of the most wanted criminals in the world. Omid Tahvili was put on the top 10 most wanted criminals list by Forbes in 2008, the same list as Osama bin Laden and El Chapo. His story of crime starts in the 90s when he immigrated to Canada from Iran. According to the RCMP, Omid came to Canada from Iran in 1994. He worked several odd jobs, including being a dishwasher and a bartender, before starting a luxury car rental and detailing company called Platinum Touch, with branches in Vancouver and Richmond, British Columbia. Omid dressed like a reputed businessman and spent most of his time promoting his businesses. He seemed like an ordinary guy who made quick progress to become an immigrant success story. However, that changed in the year 2000 when Omid first appeared on the law enforcement radar in a drug bust. He was arrested along with his brother-in-law for the possession of 3 kilos of cocaine. The late 90s were a particularly difficult time for the law enforcement agencies in Canada, with many mid-level drug traffickers gaining strength throughout Vancouver. These mid-level traffickers included several members from the immigrant communities, including young Iranians associated with the UN gang or the infamous Persian Pride gang. So at the turn of the century, the RCMP ramped up its efforts against the illicit drug trade. There were dozens of drug busts in the year 2000, resulting in hundreds of arrests. The bust that resulted in the arrest of Omid Tahvili was a result of a similar joint effort between Vancouver cops and the RCMP. The sweep resulted in 39 charges against 9 people, including Omid's brother-in-law. Cocaine wasn't the only illegal drug found in the drug bust. Police also found 8 kilos of opium, half a kilo of methamphetamine, and more than 100 grams of ecstasy. Omid fought the case for more than 3 years in court and ended up walking by convincing a judge that the drugs did not belong to him. Instead, his brother-in-law, Alvin Rohit Paul, took the fall and agreed to a plea bargain. Omid was out as a free man, but the police had now caught wind of his activities. By 2003, RCMP's 3-person Integrated Persian Intelligence Section identified Omid Tahvili as the head of one of the big gangs operating from the Lower Mainland. At the time, his group consisted of close to 30 Persians, including a known contract killer. The drug trade was just one of Omid Tahvili's criminal enterprises, as he was involved in another cross-country venture that made him millions at the expense of hundreds of senior citizens across the US and Canada. Omid, along with his brother-in-law, Sanjay Paul, and an associate, Derek Squires, ran an elaborate telemarketing scam that robbed senior victims of at least $3 million from 1999 to 2002. Omid and his co-conspirators called up gullible senior individuals and offered them massive lottery winnings in return for a processing fee. These charges would rise with every call as the scammers demanded further handling fees and taxes. One of the victims was asked for an initial sum of $700 to cash out $1.2 million. However, the elderly victim ended up paying more than $20,000 and never received a penny. Scammers used fake company names and got their fines through different Western Union branches. Checks were made in the name of First British National Holdings and DNC National Holdings Limited and sent to commercial mailboxes in Canada. Telemarketing scams were very common during that time because Canadian law did not have specific legislation dealing with the crime. The RCMP launched Project Enter with the help of the FBI and US Customs agents who used wiretaps and phone records to finally unravel the extent of these frauds. The investigation found that the perpetrators operated boiler rooms, where hundreds of people made calls 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. The targets of these calls were elderly people who were often widowed or suffering from Alzheimer's disease. These people made good targets because of their vulnerability to a sympathetic voice. Scammers across Canada were defrauding people of about $60 million a year. Omid Tahvili and his associates stole about $3 million from their victims, most of whom were elderly people living in the United States. A US federal arrest warrant was issued for Tahvili on January 30th, 2003, as he was charged with mail fraud, wire fraud, telemarketing fraud, and aiding and abetting. During court proceedings, it was found that Omid was the alleged principal of the fraudulent companies, while Sanjay Paul and Derek Joseph Squires were his employees. The court ordered redress payments to victims in both the US and the UK. Since the penalties in Canada for telemarketing fraud weren't tough enough, it was a common practice to extradite suspects to the United States. Omid and his associates were facing the same fate. Omid remained on bail and kept fighting extradition with the help of his lawyer, Amandeep Singh, who is known for his representation of high-profile and billionaire banker Rakesh Saxena in a similar extradition case. While he was doing his best to stay out of prison bars, Omid was only delaying the inevitable. He was also becoming bolder, and that would ultimately bring about his downfall. In June 2005, Omid was expecting a package from Toronto containing $300,000 of drug money. However, the package never arrived and was misplaced from the Richmond warehouse of the courier company. Looking for his lost money, Omid went into the courier office and threatened the employees. He told the courier company's district manager that the package came from a very different kind of union. He mentioned gangs like the Hells Angels, the Triads, and the UN gang, implying that he was receiving packages from them or on their behalf. Omid didn't find the money and suspected that a Vietnamese courier who had previously worked for him was behind the theft. His prime suspect had left Canada for Vietnam by this time. However, Omid Tahvili wanted his money back, so he kidnapped the man's brother-in-law. Two men arrived at the victim's home in a Porsche 911 and asked for a test drive of a used Mercedes that the victim was selling. The kidnapping victim, only identified by the court as DT, got into the car with one of the men. From there, he was beaten, blindfolded, and taken away for interrogation. During this custody, DT was stripped and sexually assaulted. Omid Tahvili finally let the man go after several hours of detention, but only with the warning that he would come after DT's family if the money wasn't recovered. As the victim got back home, he was greeted by an RCMP officer and had to spill the secrets of his terrifying ordeal. This resulted in an undercover operation against Omid Tahvili and his gang that included tapping his phone. RCMP officers arrested Omid Tahvili on the 1st of July 2005 as he was boarding a flight to Toronto. His brother-in-law, Alvin Rohit Paul, was also arrested on suspicion of being an accomplice. After his arrest, one RCMP sergeant interviewed Omid Tahvili and described him as the ringleader, kingpin, and the top dog of laundering money, and said, "You're the boss." During the kidnapping investigation, Toronto police confiscated over $100,000 in cash from a silver BMW X5 in North York with one of Omid's gang's eastern members. In Richmond, the RCMP seized another package containing $200,000 of drug money from a courier. Police believed that the site of the kidnapping was Platinum Touch, which was owned by Omid's wife, Pamela Paul, at the time. During court proceedings, Omid's appearance also became a subject of discussion. His body was covered with numerous tattoos, including a Celtic cross across his upper back and a child's face on each of his upper arms depicting his two children. Even though he presented himself as a successful Iranian businessman, he had bulked up like many steroid-using gangsters of the time. After avoiding prison for more than 5 years, Omid was finally sent to North Fraser Pretrial Center, which was established in 2001. However, even in this case, Omid Tahvili nearly walked free by throwing the case into doubt. During the trial, at least 3 people came forward and provided him with an alibi. However, a Supreme Court justice dismissed these testimonies as fabricated rubbish. The court eventually ordered Omid Tahvili to be extradited to the US on May 4, 2007. But before that, he had to wait for the sentencing in his kidnapping trial. However, Omid had another trick up his sleeve. He offered $1 million to anyone who helped him break out of prison, and eventually did it for much less. On November 15th, he changed into a janitor's uniform, put bricks under his blanket, and went for a smoke break with other workers. From there, he passed through 100 security cameras and convinced every member of the jail staff that he was a member of the cleaning staff just ending his shift. Omid Tahvili simply walked out the front door and became the first prisoner ever to break out of the detention center built 6 years earlier. The state-of-the-art detention center cost the government more than $49 million and was built to be one of the most secure detention centers in the country. So when Omid escaped, it was immediately suspected that he had inside help, and this was soon confirmed by the security cameras. The jail surveillance video showed Omid being escorted out through a series of locked doors by prison guard Edwin. Edwin was arrested the following day. He was eventually charged with obstruction of justice and accepting a bribe. Omid Tahvili allegedly promised Edwin to meet him at a gas station where he was to be paid $50,000. Edwin went to the gas station, but no one showed up. Meanwhile, the trail for Omid Tahvili turned cold within the first few weeks. The RCMP believed that with the kind of money and connections Tahvili had, he was long gone and was believed to be in his native country, Iran, a country that had no extradition treaty with Canada or the US. Omid's ex-wife, Pamela Sima Paul, was still in charge of their auto detailing business and was also the owner of his North Vancouver home worth $750,000 at the time. However, she told the police that Omid and her had not been in contact for some time, and even when they did talk in the past, it was only about the kids. On account of his criminal activities across countries, Omid Tahvili was added to America's Most Wanted list a month after his escape. His kidnapping trial continued in his absence. During the trial, Omid instructed his lawyer by phone from an unknown location. He also offered to return to custody if he was sentenced to time served for his convictions. Before escaping, he was incarcerated for 27 months, which he wanted to be included in his final sentence. Tahvili also left a voicemail message for an RCMP officer investigating his escape. While he also communicated through letters for the first few months of his escape, his letter advised his lawyer to proceed with the sentencing hearing without him, while also containing a message for his estranged wife saying that he had never cheated on her. During the trial, a letter from the Tahvili family nanny was submitted to the court, which described Tahvili as a father beloved by his children. Tahvili's wife also echoed similar thoughts in a letter. However, the prosecutor warned that these letters of love and support were written before Tahvili had asked his wife for a divorce. Omid was finally sentenced in his absence to more than 6 years in January 2008. In the meantime, Omid's closest associates also faced charges. His brother-in-law, Rohit Paul, was acquitted in the kidnapping plot. However, another brother-in-law, Reginald Paul, was extradited to the US along with partner Derek Joseph Squires in the telemarketing fraud case. Another known associate was gunned down in Kitsilano in a gang-related shooting. The prison guard who helped Omid escape pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 39 months in prison in August 2008. Omid stayed on the run and RCMP was struggling to get a trace of him. In September 2008, an anonymous tipster called the police and a local journalist to tell them that Omid was killed after he was shot 5 times in the head, chest, arms, and legs. The caller also claimed that he was keeping the bullet-riddled body in his freezer and wanted to negotiate a reward. However, he refused to say who killed Tahvili and didn't send any pictures as proof of his claims. The investigators rejected reports of Tahvili's death and said that it was Tahvili himself sending anonymous tips to convince the police that he is dead. Omid Tahvili had completely fallen off the radar since then, apart from a brief appearance in 2017 when it was reported that he may have called the police to negotiate his return. He said that he was willing to present himself to the authorities in exchange for a promise not to extradite him to the United States. However, there were doubts over the credibility of the call, as he claimed to be in Toronto, but the location could not be verified. America's Most Wanted website now states the FBI believes Tahvili to be hiding anywhere from Canada to the Middle East or Europe. He is believed to have connections across the world and is described by the FBI as extremely dangerous. Omid Tahvili remains one of the longest-running fugitives in the world. All evidence seems to point to one conclusion. We may never find out where he is, and his chapter might be as good as closed. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to see more like this in the future. Also leave a comment down below on what you'd like to see next. Thanks for watching and have a good one.